I'd like you to think for a moment about your community and the neighborhood where you live. How does it feel when you speak to your neighbors, your family, when you go to your favorite coffee shop or look at the constructions around? Do you have a favorite pathways that you like walking? What does it mean, a well-being for you? How does it make you feel? How do you experience a well-being? What about care and the time you spend caring for your family, for your neighbors, for your garden? What about your presence? And what about your trust that you build with each other, with your friends, with your local government, with the country's government, with companies when you go and buy your products?
We've been hearing a lot this morning about the systems that have been stretched thin over the last couple of years, and the cultures that have essentially support those systems. And today we're going to talk about innovation, and we're going to talk about innovation cultures and how innovation cultures manifest within urban contexts. And what happens is that these innovation cultures are being perpetuated by the same old values of newness and efficiency. And clearly, those values that are supporting innovation culture are not effective for sustainability, for resilience, and the kinds of urban cultures that are necessary to get us through or to the next pandemic, as we heard about this morning. And so the question that we are asking today is, what if innovation prioritized goals of well-being over economic growth? What if innovation prioritized care for others over novel products? And what if innovation prioritized building trust over getting things done quickly?
For the last 3 years, Eric and I have been working together, studying, researching, and designing in one of the cities in Europe, Cluj-Napoca, in Transylvania, in Romania. How do we build, design such a structures that support these kind of values? We have recently published a new book, Activating Values in Urban Transitions, which presents such novel approach in Romania and can be applicable to other places. We have worked with the extraordinary local partners across public, private, civic sectors, including, and very importantly, young people. And we have worked with the extraordinary graphic artist, Artivistory Collective, to support this research. It's a qualitative research that we are presenting in this book, and we would like to invite you onto this journey. This work was supported by the new kind of foundation that is forward-looking and exploring what happens when we activate values for well-being in cities.
So I'll just say that the work was supported by the Botnar Foundation that has given us a chance to do this. They have funded an effort in Cluj-Napoca for 10 years that they call Our Cluj. And what we're going to talk about today are the structures that support that kind of investment that they're making in Cluj. But first, let's talk a little bit about ourselves and what brings us here. As was mentioned, my name is Eric Gordon. I'm a professor of communications. I study media, and I study the way that media impacts institutions. And I've been doing this for 10 years. I have been working within the space of innovation, and I have seen that people are drawn to what's sexy, what's new, what's shiny, and that has driven a lot of urban innovation cultures around the world. And over the last couple of years, I've come to the realization that that's no longer effective. That in fact, it was actually never effective. But what we learned over the last couple of years is we saw the stress in our systems, and we saw that innovation, the newness, the novelty that gets us to new places, if that doesn't center values, then nothing will change.
I'll share why is it that I'm here with Eric. I'm a social chemist. I grew up in Slovenia. It's a small country in Central Europe and a young democracy. And I have always felt a member of the planetary communities where the human values of care and trust are prioritized. And here I was in 30s. I found myself a CEO of a Slovenian pharmaceutical company in New York. And I realized that, in fact, where the value should be prioritized, profit mattered more than care for others. And I felt that something is profoundly wrong, yet somehow it seemed to be widely accepted. With this insight, I transitioned from a corporate world to work with a different kind of structures and organizations that are trying to approach things differently. This includes being part of the Clinton Foundation, where we tackled HIV/AIDS pandemic in a new way. This led me further to continue as a social chemist, and this is how I met Eric, and this is how we are working together on this journey. I will share with you a little bit what we did. The city where we worked is Cluj-Napoca in Romania. It's intermediary city. It's a very vibrant city where population of 400 million people has almost 1/3 of people young among them, mostly students with 10 university. It's a hub of innovation that is happening in Romania. It has been a youth capital in Europe, and it has been part of the innovation culture in Europe. It's a very young democracy, part of the European Union. However, it had a very turbulent past, including the communist past, and it has very rich culture, Romanian, Hungarians, Roma, Germans, and so on, and it's really known for the multicultural and diversity. We will share with you that especially young people are centered in the city ecosystem. There have been a number of innovative ways that young people has come together to really explore the future of this city.
So one of the concepts that we want to introduce today is something called an urban living laboratory that some of you may be familiar with, but it's a structure of innovation that we see, especially in Europe, usually housed within a municipality and always multi-sectoral. So, and often what happens within urban living laboratories is that they're focused on specific issues like housing, energy, and they fund and they support certain projects towards certain ends. They're always time limited, and out of them come particular products, particular technology innovations. That's typically how they work. But what we saw in Cluj was a little different. What we saw in Cluj was an innovation culture that was not simply about market innovations, that was not just looking for tech solutions, that was not just looking for efficiencies. And we started taking a hard look at that. Why was that going on? And what was the role that the foundation that was investing money in supporting this innovation culture within this city playing? And how can we actually support what was happening within these, from these innovators? How can we actually support the kind of work and the kind of values that they were bringing to the table? And so often, those values get left behind. And let's talk about that a little bit.
In Cluj, we designed the urban living laboratory that includes all kinds of projects that support social innovation, multidisciplinary research, various mapping. And here are some examples that I want to share. One such example is we co-designed with the municipality, with young people, with education cluster that is formed in the city, a social innovation fund that has supported over 140 new teams, young people teams, all the way to high school, to propose, develop, and support their social innovation projects. And this was not just about the Social Innovation Fund. It was, in fact, how can we contribute and how can the Living Laboratory contribute to the innovation culture and the social innovation ecosystem that this city has been lacking and has been very keen to develop together with us.
Okay, so what did we learn? We learned that the formation that we were seeing is called a values-based urban living laboratory. It is a structure of innovation that supports things outside of market efficiency. There were 3 practices that we identified in this values-based urban living laboratory. One was the space for imagining futures, the role that arts played, the role that collective imagination played within an innovation culture. The other one was the deliberate focus and the specific focus on remembering the past. And the third, as part of this dialectic, was sharing power. And ultimately, that was the goal of all of these innovations that we saw forming in Cluj. And so imagining futures. As I said, the role of imagination in innovation is key. We can't change the world unless we're able to imagine it first. The support mechanisms and the support structures that are necessary for that imagination to take place are significant. They required the presence of artists throughout. As Barbara mentioned, we had a group of artists that were working with us in every single aspect of our work, let alone the work that was happening within the innovation cluster. We had representations of visual artists and other kinds of artists present to help with that collective imagination, and people made space for that. And that was of ultimate priority for the people that we were working with.
One cannot imagine a new future unless you remember and reconcile the past. This is for each of us individually, and this is for us collectively. And this is very often what is missing. And this is what is blocking us from unleashing the power of innovation. We have found out that remembering the past and reconciling the past is extraordinarily important, especially in cultures that have endured very traumatic past, such as Romania and its communist past. It is very important that people talk about it, that people feel comfortable and safe discussing it and addressing spaces and experience from this time to imagine a different future. The example I want to share is, for example, in Cluj, in the 16th century, Cluj was very well known for urban gardens, or so-called gardening. The Hostezeni Hungarian community provided vegetables and fruits for most of the city. However, over centuries, this has been disappearing, and during industrialization, almost all of it has disappeared, and what you see today, vegetables and fruits coming mostly cheaper and imported to the city, yet the city is based in extraordinary fertile Transylvanian plane. So it's really important to remember and reconcile the past, and this has started to happen, and we have done so through the research and mapping the environments where these remaining Hostezeni gardens are there and where there are new urban gardening communities that are slowly appearing for the future.
And finally, sharing power. Ultimately, what was happening here was a questioning of the hierarchies that have structured innovation for as long as especially the young people can remember. Working with government is always a challenge. The way in which the individual projects were always in dialogue with the hierarchies that were present within government and within the media was absolutely important. And the multi-sectoral nature of this arrangement was important because people were open to questioning those hierarchies. And so to see this as a dialectic that was the core of this innovation culture, of imagining futures, of reconciling the past, to ultimately share power, was what we need to cultivate within the context of Cluj. We came up with 10 design recommendations that we don't have time to go into, but our goal here is to make sure that innovation is centered, youth culture is centered in the transitions that we want to see, and that ultimately we support values such as care and trust in the way that innovation manifests and in who benefits from those innovations. We saw that happening in Cluj. We are very enthusiastic about reproducing that in other cities. And we want to emphasize the fact that innovation cultures are local, and that what we learned in Cluj was specific to that particular geographical context, but every geographical context needs to manifest its own innovation culture.
With this, I would just for a moment like to bring you back to where we started, to go back to your community and the neighborhood and think again, what are those values that needs to be prioritized? And what is your role in bringing these values to communities that you are working with? We are here at Devex, and Devex shares ideas that shape the future. And it's critically important that we begin collectively investing into processes and structures, different kind of structures and different kind of processes that include these practices that we shared to imagine and create together a different future where values are prioritized and not just the market efficiencies. With this, I would just like to share the contacts to share our exciting work that continues, not only in Cluj, but Foundation Botnar is working in several cities on all continents, and looking forward to continue these conversations with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.